Okay, we're starting off another grammar video with one sentence from Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. This one's kind of a doozy. In fact, I think I need to stand completely out of frame so you can take a look at it. We have, but in fact, they are invariably the beneficiaries of hidden advantages and extraordinary opportunities and cultural legacies that allow them to learn and work hard and make sense of the world in ways others cannot. Whew. Are you dreading this? It's really not going to be that bad, I promise, okay? But we are going to need some colored markers. So let's try to find our subjects and verbs. And we have a lot of stuff going on here, kind of like we've had in other videos. But if we let's start at the beginning of the sentence and try to figure out what may or may not be a subject or a verb. But nope, that's a conjunction. In fact, prepositional phrase, we'll come back to those. They. Well, they seems like a word that could be a subject, and in fact, it is. Okay, so we have subject. And what are they doing? What's the verb associated with they? Well, it's are. Okay? So we have subject and verb, and right off the bat, we're off to a good start. Okay? But in fact, they are what? Do we have any objects? Okay, so verbs have subjects. They always have subjects. They don't always have objects. But in fact, today, they have an object, and not just one. They have, I think, 3. So they are what? Actually, no, we have one object, and we have objects of prepositions all over the place. So, they are what? They are the beneficiaries, okay? So this is our direct object. Subject does the action. Beneficiaries receive the action. And these are linking verbs, so technically we wouldn't apply those same terms to them, but you kind of get the idea, right? Subject, verb, and we can think of this as a direct object. Now, they are beneficiaries of what? We've got all this stuff going on. Well, let's try to find some prepositional phrases. We'll go green with all of our prepositional phrases. We already mentioned one. In fact, preposition. And then every preposition has an object. This is our object, and those objects have to be nouns or pronouns. Fact is a noun. Do we have any more prepositions? Not in that first line. The beneficiaries of. Well, of is a preposition. Of what? Here's where it gets a little bit tricky. So, of advantages. So this is one object of the preposition, and I say one because this one preposition has a couple, in fact I think 3 different objects. So a little crazy. Of advantages and opportunities. Another noun, and so this is actually another object of this preposition. Okay? Object. Object. And what else? They are beneficiaries of hidden advantages and extraordinary opportunities and cultural legacies. So we have another object of the preposition. And this time our preposition is like 3 lines away, right there. Okay? And that is one big, funky prepositional phrase. Now, in this prepositional phrase, we've got other words, right, that we haven't highlighted and we haven't used to draw arrows. Let's go red. We've already used red. Let's go orange. What is hidden? What's it doing? Is it a subject? No. Is it a verb? No. Is it an adjective? Yes. An adjective is a word that describes another word, a noun or a pronoun. What is hidden describing? It's describing advantages, okay? So we have adjective describing advantages. Extraordinary, another adjective describing, this time, opportunities. And we have legacies. What kind of legacies? That's a question you can ask to find your adjectives. A cultural legacy, whoop, describing that there, okay? Now, we have some conjunctions. I'm going to need more markers. We'll go purple for our conjunctions. We have conjunctions inside the prepositional phrase, right? So of, hidden advantages, and. So it's called a coordinating conjunction. You use ands all the time, right? And extraordinary opportunities, and it's a conjunction. Cultural legacies. If we start at the beginning of the sentence, we have a conjunction here, but. This is actually another coordinating conjunction. You may have been told that you should never start a sentence with and or but or anything like that. That's a rule that's not really true. It makes life easier. But once you know how to work the English language and you know that you don't do this every single time, then you're allowed to do it. If you start every single sentence with but, well then your writing's not going to be all that great. But you can do it. I don't encourage it all the time, but here and there it will work. I think it works here. So we have but, and we'll get to our other ands down there. We've covered, I think, all of this first chunk except for, I think I need another color. We'll go light green, invariably. Okay? What is invariably? Well, it's describing something, but it's not describing a noun or a pronoun. It's actually describing our verb are. So this is an adverb. Okay? Describing a verb. Adverbs also describe other adverbs or adjectives. Okay, so if we take a look at what we've colored up here so far, we have, but in fact, they are invariably the beneficiaries of hidden advantages and extraordinary opportunities and cultural legacies. That could be a sentence, right? So we could stop there. We actually have this other chunk that follows. That allow them to learn and work hard and make sense of the world in ways others cannot. So what's going on here? Well, we have one chunk connected to another chunk, and what kind of words can do that? Well, it could be a coordinating conjunction like but that's not what we have. This is what we call a relative pronoun. I'll use purple because I'm running out of colors. But relative pronoun. And this is also it's a dependent marker word, right? In other videos we've talked about dependent clauses. This first part is an independent clause. If we remove all of this other stuff, this sentence still makes sense, right? It has a subject, it has a verb, capital letter, so throw a period in right here. We're good to go because it expresses a complete thought. Now this is giving us more information about that chunk. It is a dependent clause. If we start here, we don't have enough information to make sense of the sentence, right? That allows them to learn and work hard and make sense of the world in ways others cannot. Now, do we have a subject and a verb here? Well, we have a verb, right? Let's go back to red, marking up our main stuff. Allow. Allow is a verb. Now, do we have a subject? And that's a little bit tricky here because usually your subjects are in front and we don't really have a word like they in front, okay? But a relative pronoun, in addition to acting as your dependent marker word or subordinate conjunction, it can also act as the subject of the sentence because it is a pronoun, right? Pronouns can be subjects of sentences. So this is our relative pronoun, which tells us it's a dependent clause, but it's also acting as the subject of the dependent clause, okay? That allow them to learn and work hard and make sense of the world in ways others cannot. Now, what is that describing? Well, it's actually describing all of the objects of our prepositional phrase, right? It's describing these are advantages and opportunities and cultural legacies that allow them to learn and work and make sense of the world. If we wanted to rewrite this and eliminate some of the stuff at the beginning of the sentence, we could take away that and instead have a compound subject that would read, hidden advantages and extraordinary opportunities and cultural legacies allow them to learn, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So that is replacing or is referring back to the three objects of our prepositional phrase. Now, moving on, because the video is already getting a little long, I imagine. That allow them to learn and work hard and make sense of the world in ways others cannot. Well, let's skip ahead to things we already know how to handle. We have one more prepositional phrase. Now we have two. Of the world is one. Of is our preposition. And then what's the object of the preposition? This one's a little bit trickier because we have a couple other words in it, but world is a noun. It's the object of the preposition. And this is an article or a modifier. And it's telling us what kind of world? The world. Not any world, it's the world. In ways, prep, if I can write, object. Now we have, actually this gets even more complicated, okay. We have this word to, okay, and if you've ever taken a grammar class, you were in high school English, you probably know that you can use to as a preposition, okay. I went to the store. And in that case, to the store is a prepositional phrase. But what is to followed by here? It's actually followed by a verb, what looks like a verb. So, to learn. And when we have something like this, we call it an infinitive, okay? It's not actually the main verb of the sentence. I can't to go to the store, right? I go to the store. But whenever you have the to in front, it's something, it's like a package. And it's called an infinitive. So we have one infinitive here. We have these other words too, right? We have another verb, work, and we have another verb, make sense. These are all, so these are sort of like verbs-ish. We'll call them verbals. And remember we had up here, of, that single preposition had three objects. This one, to, has three separate verbals completing the infinitive, okay? So to, we can actually say that allow them to learn and to work hard and to make sense of the world in ways others cannot. Is that beginning to make sense? We have our conjunctions. What color were our conjunctions? They were purple, so we've got some ands again. And is a conjunction. And is a conjunction. All right, make sense. Make sense. Make what? That's kind of like an object of the verbal in the infinitive. It gets a little complicated there. You can kind of see, you know, a verbal can still take what will appear to be objects, so it's that sort of thing going on. What other words that allow them? They. When we have they, it can act as a subject, okay? They crossed the street. But I wouldn't say them crossed the street, okay? Whenever you see them, you know that it's functioning in some way as an object, okay? It could be the object of a preposition, it could be the object of, in this case, the verb allow. So we've got these things covered. I'm not going to mark up the rest, except I will add one more thing. We've got these two words here at the end. And as I'm getting here, I notice that others and cannot is actually another set of subject and verb, right? So we have, those were going red, subject and verb. And a lot of times we'll use dependent clauses or subordinate clauses, things that can't stand on their own, but we'll leave out that dependent marker word, that relative pronoun, because we could actually say, in this case, make sense of the world in ways that others cannot. And a lot of times when we speak or when we write, we'll just omit that. But what we really have here is another subordinate clause. Relative pronoun telling us that we have a clause that cannot stand by itself, and then another set of subject and verb. This is a pretty wild sentence, and I imagine the video is a little bit long, but I hope it's beginning to make sense to you, and I'll give you like a PDF or something that breaks down each of these things as we go. But as you can see, we have a lot of stuff going on here, but when you sort of color through everything, you realize that everything is accounted for. I think we've still got a couple words that we didn't use markers on, but we've talked about just about everything. The, of course, is another article. And so when you eliminate things, you start to see the language comes in chunks, right? We have a chunk of subject and verb. We have chunks that are prepositional phrases. We have chunks that are infinitives. We have chunks that are subordinate clauses. When you start to realize that, sentences make sense. And then when you're writing, you might realize you have a partial chunk. And you can't really have partial chunks. If you're going to talk about chunks, you have to have a complete chunk. You can't just say of, and you can't just have a subject without a verb. You can't have a verb without a subject. So once you begin to realize that things come in chunks like this, or packages, you have to have the complete package in order for the sentence to make sense.